Impro Theater School has some new classes coming up. Saturdays, starting on June 18th at 10:30 a.m., Ryan Smith has Intro to Narrative, which is a supportive and fun start for those with zero to little experience or for those who are orienting themselves to the Impro Theater style. That's an 8-week class, Saturdays. Then Declutter Your Improv with yours truly, that's me, comes up on Tuesdays, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific time. This is a class to simplify, slow down, stay present for a clearer improv experience. That's Tuesdays for 4 weeks. And then, starting on Saturday, June 25th at 10:30 a.m., Physical Core, 8 weeks with Maddie Goff. It's the first workshop in our series of 4 curriculum workshops and the foundation of Impro style of narrative improv. You'll work on grounded characters, a relaxed state of play, and fully realized environments. Hey, it's Mike Rock with Impro Theater Los Angeles. The class is called Declutter Your Improv. So how do you declutter something that you're just making up? Well, it should be called How to Prevent Clutter from Happening in Your Improv, but that's not as catchy. We work on slowing down.
So we slow down the offers
so that everything can be used. Everything can be explored. About staying present with your scene partner so that you can go deeper, trusting yourself and trusting your scene partner and trusting the unknown that you're going to discover together what needs to happen to tell your story. It's about experiencing the connection between you and your scene partner and the rest of the ensemble so you can have a clearer, more fulfilling storytelling experience. I hope you can join us for Declutter Your Improv. Impro Theater and the cast and crew of this online performance would like to take this time to honor the indigenous peoples of the ancestral and unceded homelands we each inhabit, and to consider the legacy of colonization and its far-reaching effects. Hey everybody, welcome to Impro Talk for a very special Juneteenth, June 19th edition. So excited about this panel of guests, and thank you for joining us on Impro Talk. If you're listening live or if you're watching live on June 19th, Juneteenth 2021, thank you, and I hope you are commemorating the day appropriately and doing what you want to do. But now, more importantly, without further ado, I want to go through our roundtable panel and introduce each person one at a time. Marian Yusufu has lovingly agreed to spotlight people as I say their names. So he is a writer, an improviser, a certified public accountant, a teacher, a very funny guy, and sometimes people touch his hair, which is unfortunate. Jeffrey Thompson, ladies and gentlemen, is one of our guests. Thank you, Jeff, for being here. Were you going to say something?
Not a certified public accountant. I'm an enrolled agent. People get them confused all the time. But since I have a platform, so an enrolled agent is somebody who takes a 3-part licensing exam, which is administered by the IRS. A CPA takes a 4-part licensing exam, which is administered by the state accounting board. Both people can prepare your tax returns. Both people can represent you in front of the IRS. I just focus primarily on taxation. CPAs sometimes focus on accounting, and taxation might be a second thing. So now you know. I don't want to get sued by the CPA board for publicly stating that I'm a CPA. That is my big fear. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. I think I can honestly say that Diana Elizabeth Jordan does not fear being sued by the CPA board. She is a solo performer, a writer, an artist, an educator, a disability arts educator, a disability rights activist, an improviser, and a lovely person. Please welcome to the panel, Diana Elizabeth Jordan from Chicago, Illinois.
Hello, everybody, and I'm going to do a brief audio description. I'm an African-American woman with short curly twists. I'm wearing a blue dress with white flowers. I am so thrilled to be here with friends and friends I just made, and just to talk about, to celebrate blackness and beautifulness all at the same time on Juneteenth. What could make my day better? And I will be in Afrofuturism tonight.
Thank you, Diana. I forgot to do my audio description even after we talked about it. I'm a white man with salt and pepper gray hair, purplish tie, blue shirt, and kind of a pale green background for my video. She is a Cincinnati-based artist, writer, improviser, actor, acting teacher, dramaturg, and a force to be reckoned with. Please welcome Tatiana Godfrey, ladies and gentlemen.
What's happening? Everybody calls me Tati. I'm a Black woman. I've got a Afro mohawk. I'm in a blue button-down shirt against a cream-colored wall that has a picture of a palm tree-laden street and a bookshelf.
Yes, he is a director of photography and has his own company, Flippin' Entertainment, based in Colorado, I think. Please welcome Dennis Lee Flippin. Dennis.
Actually based in LA now, from Colorado, and I'm wearing a white shirt, and I'm in my office right now. It's my film stuff. I'm always in here. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Very happy to be here.
Thank you, Dennis. He is a director of animation, has worked at places like MTV and Disney and Cartoon Network. Please welcome Kimson Albert.
Hey, everybody. Super glad to be here. I'm a light-skinned, biracial Black man with a salt and pepper beard, no hair, quite bald, but quite tan since I just spent a couple of days in Baja. Really happy to be here. Thanks, everybody.
Sweet. She is spotlighting people one at a time. She is a comedian, a producer, a director, and a mother who has a baby in arms who is going to probably become part of this interview. Please welcome Marian Yusufu.
Oh, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be amongst all of these creators.
And last but not least, he is an actor and a narrator who has done hundreds of audiobooks. You have heard his voice, trust me, and narrator of the very long-running show, The First 48. Please welcome Dion Graham.
Hey, everybody. How are you? This Black man is in Brooklyn wearing a gray, white, and red polo type shirt, and thrilled to be with all these great people here and glad to be with you.
All right. Awesome. I want to thank Jennifer Epps, who is our chat moderator, and I want to thank Chris Dion, who is our OBS operator, and a special shout out to Mickey Stith, who is the virtual technical director at Impro Theater, and she did a bit of heavy lifting because I threw a bunch of new stuff at her late in the game this week, so I want to thank Mickey for helping us out. So it is Saturday, June 19th. One thing that I didn't know was going to happen when I started putting together this panel was that Congress and the White House were going to act quickly and suddenly make Juneteenth a national federal holiday. It's been in the works for many, many years. Let's start out with just reactions around the horn. Anybody who wants to just an initial reaction to the fact that that news suddenly comes out.
Thank God. Thank God. It's one of the things I just can't even believe it's taking this long for something so historic, you know.
Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, ditto. Just, I think about my grandparents and my ancestors and the shoulders that we all stand on, and I think about how that feels when I used to celebrating the 4th of July, which was always I had a very conflictions about, and to be able to share or celebrate this day as a true day of freedom when everyone was finally free. Not necessarily equal, but freedom, and that's really really beautiful feeling. Mixed emotion, but very beautiful.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I just
I think.
realized.
Oh,
Oh,
whoops. Go ahead, Jeff.
oh,
I was gonna say, I just enjoy the 1 foot kind of acknowledging the past and 1 foot kind of looking at the future. A lot of the language that's been coming through with this announcement, a lot of the reactions have been definitely like, this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's a good gesture in terms of sparking new dialogue and kind of opening up a lot of ideas that are not really or have been shelved and haven't been really in the popular lexicon outside of Black communities. But so it's good, and then it's like, well, what's next, and where can we move forward? So I'm still kind of in that state of mind, actually.
um, before I say my thoughts, I didn't give my audio or my visual description.
Oh,
my
please.
audio
Yes,
description of
absolutely.
the easiest thing is to picture a piece of broccoli, put glasses and a goatee on it, and then put brown skin, and that's me. So the wearing a black collared shirt, got a whole bunch of stuff going on in the background, got a cat who's hanging out, and my cat Cisco feels similar to me, where it's like, this is a great thing, because there's so many people who, even being quote unquote educated, don't know a lot about the history of America. And this is just interesting in the comparative, like, zeitgeist of people also saying, like, critical race theory isn't a thing. We don't need to talk about how we were racist, because that's the truth. We were racist. No more racism. We ended it. We had Barack Obama. Now we have Joe Biden. There's no more racism. But so it's interesting to see one step forward with this very big proportion of the leadership in our country and the population who is resisting this change. And what does that mean?
Right. Tatiana.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting way, if this is what they're doing, of acknowledging an ongoing complicity, being complicit in an ongoing like white supremacy. And the way that we do this is by like taking a day off. Business is interrupted. And I think that like there's some sort of statement about that I think leads to a larger conversation about like what is being done in reconciliation if it is going to be ongoing.
I noticed, Dion, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that it's great to have Juneteenth officially acknowledged, and to actually have it come more into the larger conversation, not just in the Black community, and coming hard on the heels of the commemoration of the Tulsa Massacre, and on all of these continuing assaults on voting rights for people of color, Black and brown people. It's significant, and I think it's also important for us to not merely let this be a distraction from the larger struggle as well. Though at the same time, Juneteenth, but I'm just saying, there's a lot to talk about.
Right. Interesting. Dion mentions the 1921 Tulsa Massacre that for years was whitewashed or whatever you want to call it, washed as a riot, as opposed to an actual bombing, like domestic terrorism bombing of a community. And the fact that came around and is beginning to be exposed, beginning to be understood. There's been like a flush of news and reporting about it, and books and et cetera. And when you say Juneteenth is a holiday, I'm seeing a lot of people talk about, well, okay, great, it's a holiday. We've skipped a lot of steps in trying to make things right. There's a graphic of a kid climbing up a stairway. I'm sure there are a million cartoons and graphics, but there's a graphic of a kid climbing up a stairway. Um, Notably, it's a white-skinned child, and it's like the bottom step is talking about race in schools, and then stopping police violence, and then voting rights, and then reparations, and then at the very top it says making Juneteenth a holiday, and the kid is reaching their foot to skip all those intermediate steps. And I gotta say that it's sort of shame inducing to think that this, I mean, obviously, of course, it's important to have a commemoration and have a holiday. It's just sort of like when you think about how government can just say, like, you know what, we gotta put a big bow on this thing. Let's put a big bow on it. And I heard an attorney I've read an attorney saying, like, oh, great, Friday, courts are closed. All of my people who are being held in holding cells have no chance of getting out for the weekend because now there's a national holiday that jumps in the way that we didn't even know was coming, that sort of thing. A lot of ramifications of this right thing to do issue that makes it so complicated and frustrating. And at the same time, if it does bring awareness, then terrific. So let's talk about how, as artists, as creators, as communicators, let's talk about various approaches or responsibilities outside of academia that artists and creators can do to kind of, help raise awareness about these issues. Obviously, social media is important and that sort of thing, but there's a lot going on. Tati, I think you mentioned that you typically on Juneteenth post that you want your white friends to donate to worthy causes, that sort of thing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. You mentioned like the shame, and like white guilt is a real thing. And so like I definitely play into that, and I say, if you want to give me money, I will be donating to some institution. The Martha P. Johnson Institution is getting it this year. And because we gotta, it's about giving back in my mind. Well, I want to talk about your question, Mike, about like what you're doing right now, like as artists, and something that I feel is like a responsibility of mine as a dramaturg, is to hold space, to offer opportunities to traditionally excluded voices, and to hold space for them to actively be taking up space and being in charge of their own stories. Whose stories are we telling? You talk about Tulsa, and who is telling the stories? And how are we telling these stories? Those are questions that I ask, and I like invite everybody who's making stories with me to also ask, like, let's tell these stories responsibly.
Great. I love that. Diana?
Yeah, I think awareness is not enough. It needs to be followed by some type of action, and there are a million types of action you can take. But I think as an artist and an activist, I feel a tremendous responsibility to take action and to tell stories that, I mean, I didn't hear about the Tulsa Massacre growing up. I mean, and it happened in enough time that should have been an important part of my history. This happened in 1921. I mean, 100 years ago. By the time I went to high school, that was the year before the Holocaust, and I learned about the Holocaust. And I'm not saying the Holocaust is that important. It is, but so is the fact that a community of people were murdered mercilessly for 2 years, yet that hasn't been a part of the lexicon of the history I learned about. So I think as artists, to find ways to tell those stories, however we tell them through our art, is important, because so much of our history, especially for intersectional marginalized communities, have been silenced. And we don't know. I do a lot about disability because there's a lot of disability and the intersectionality of our histories and stories that need to be told however we choose to tell them as artists.
Yeah, critical.
Yeah, I'll jump in as a very foreigner, so feel free to scream at me if I don't know what I am talking about. And also as a mom and as an educator, I always come from that perspective when I'm trying to connect human to human. And for me, if I've been here now for about 30 years, and it was put upon me, my parents put it upon me to understand the land that I live in, and educate me. And then now I have to do the same thing for my children in terms of understand the land that you live on, understand the privilege of living on this land, understand the perspective of where I've come from. So these are the things I'm constantly having to recalibrate and impart on my child. I put it now upon those that live here to do that. Those that consistently benefit from this environment to do that and do that for their children, not later, but now. Because when you do that, a shift starts to happen. And when they're in the playground together, I call the playground the workplace for them. Don't come to me to solve the problem. They took your toy, you took their toy, you figure it out together. This is your space to communicate, right? And so that's what I can say. I also like to say, just as war crimes happen, you guys love to tell when the bad guys in Africa do the terrible things now. I would love to offer up the opportunity for those who have been marginalized here to take the war crimes to the UN and all the places that you guys have created called courts to do that, because it needs to be heard and it needs to come from another person's perspective to wag the hands, right? That's why we do therapy. I've had one failed marriage. I don't want another failed marriage. And so I consistently do therapy so that the therapist can watch both of us idiots wag our hands at each other. And then the therapist will go, okay, well, you're paying me to do what you should. Okay, well, all right, this is what you should do. Maybe we should think of something like that. I don't know. That's just my thought.
It has been suggested at some point about modeling the Truth and Reconciliation courts or the Truth and Reconciliation hearings, and maybe trying to create a truth commission for the history of racism in America, which I think would be amazing. I don't know if we can expect something like that to ever happen, but who else? Jeff, did you have a thought? Yeah.
So I'm thinking about the term gaslighting, and I've recently heard gaslighting from a racial perspective. The idea of like racial gaslighting, which is this idea that basically like everything's fine, and the reason why things aren't okay in your life is because it's something that you're doing. And we know that like abusers use gaslighting to avoid taking blame. And I think one of the things that is happening, and we've seen this in just like how people can just tune out truth from scientists and like people who literally like I also teach, and like I have students argue with me sometimes. I'm like, but you're 100% wrong, and you can't just say that you're right because you want to be right. Like that's not how that works. So it's not, and I know that somebody who's listening is like, oh, you're right because you're an authority at authority. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they need to have actual proof. Like I can substantiate anything that I say, right? And we've become a society where you can just ignore things, right? Like the fact that people don't understand why like they shouldn't compare wearing a mask to the Holocaust or slavery or being incarcerated. Like the fact that and then you try to explain that to somebody, and it's a fundamental lack of empathy. And the reason for it is because it allows you to maintain power, and people don't like talking about the privilege and power that they have, but it allows you to do that without ever having to question it. Nobody wants to be wrong or question it, but like in order to be anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti any phobia or ism, you have to realize that even little things that you've done in the past that you thought were okay might not be that. And nobody wants to think that they're a bad guy. But we're all, can I swear?
Yeah, yes.
Shitty people sometimes. So it's very important that I said shitty people. Like it wouldn't have, the rhetoric effect of that would have been lost had I not said that. I could have found another word.
You found the right word, Jeff.
Thank you.
Yes, How to Be I recommend the book, Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, because it's so, the argument is so practical. It just says, look, if you want to practice some empathy, if you want to be a world citizen, if you want to respect other humans that share your space, here's how you can do it. I mean, here's among many other great writers. I wanted to open the floor to anyone else who had thoughts just now. Kimson.
I wanted to get back to the idea of artist as a voice for, as a voice for as an agent of change, or, a voice of enlightening folks. I think story is our strongest currency that we have as human beings. So our experience, how we relate our experience to other people, who we are, how we express who we are to other people. These are really powerful ways to affect the people around us, even if they don't agree with what we have to say. But I think as storytellers and as artists, it's really important to find our voice within the voice we're trying to express, or within the views that we're trying to express. And just like was mentioned earlier, however we want to, tell those stories doesn't necessarily need to be one-to-one. It was an interesting thing that happened recently with this new series. I forget if it was on HBO or no, I think it was on Amazon. The Barry, is it Underground? Anyway, there was Underground
Railroad. The Colson Whitehead book.
No, sorry, not Underground Railroad. The other one, what is it called? Them? It's like a horror house in the 50s or something.
Yes.
Right. So a lot of my friends in television, a lot of writer friends of mine were, they're Black creators, so they have their own shows and all this stuff, and they were getting kind of like, notes from the reversals from the networks saying, they're realizing there was a big backlash with Black, trauma, kind of, I guess, trauma porn, and we don't want to deal with that anymore. And, so it's, there's all these weird sensibilities that are kind of affecting, mainstream productions of things where people want to be really sensitive, but then they'll go to the nth degree where we're like, well, we're not going to do any more slavery, and which is true. There's a segment, it's a bunch of people who don't want to see Black people being hurt all the time, and Black bodies being, like our pain isn't. It has become very easily watchable. To be honest, it becomes like white people are very used to seeing Black people hurting on screen, and then the flip side of that is that Black people start getting used to that, which is ridiculous, right? So, and then at the same time, as storytellers, what are the stories we want to tell that can be truthful, and then also truthful to ourselves, truthful to, if we're doing historical stuff, truthful to events, and then at the same time, really honor a story or honor the whatever narrative we're really trying to tell, in whatever medium we're using to express that. And I think, we're really at a crossroads, and Black artists have always, in this country especially, have always been at a crossroads with how to express themselves in all the mediums, and bring their experience to whatever, medium that they're using. And I think we're really at a crossroads now where the general discussion is so fast and detailed, and Juneteenth is not, now people are talking about Juneteenth and everything, and you know, the Tulsa Massacre. 2 years ago, nobody was talking about any of this stuff, right? Like in the way it is being spoken of now. So I think that as artists, you know, we can always be ahead of the game in terms of just being fearless and bringing stories of underrepresented voices. And you know, especially in this country, you know, there's so many underrepresented voices when the country itself is based on so many different diverse voices, you know. So I think we need to make sure as artists that we are at least I need to make sure that I'm honoring like the reality of it, and then also honoring the story I want to tell, and kind of navigating those things in a way that's really honest and true. So I don't know if that made any sense, but do you feel like that as artists we're important? That's what I want to say. We're very important.
Yeah, I second that. I want to add on with a little pain story, because the only way I can explain things, yeah, I'm sorry, is by my telling my story. And thank God I'm a comedian, because I would have bitten the head off of this shop person. But literally, my baby took a little baby food and threw it to the ground, because she's understanding the concept of cause and effect. Won't he do it? Ha! Ha! You know? So she did it, and the thing landed on my foot. And then I proceed internally to freak out, because I'm such an empath. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope another person doesn't climb over this glass. I hope that the baby doesn't hurt herself. I hope the shop person that's gonna come over here and help is not gonna get hurt. Like, there's so many stories going on in my head versus just being like, shh. And then no one does anything. Mind you, this store is like 100 square feet. I'm gonna call it out. I wasn't gonna call them out. Mothers. It's a place where you can go and like literally shop, you know, for little things with your WIC card, because women need safe places to shop. Women that make a certain level of money need a safe place to shop. And we're all winning in being equitable in this space. So I'm saying mothers because you guys can learn and do better. No one came to help. It wasn't a Ralph's where it's like, it was just me and a baby alone. We all heard the glass drop. We all heard my gasp. And at that moment, anyone could have been like, what's going on? Nothing. I literally did it all by myself, where I just stepped away, walked out of the store, cleaned up my foot, dragging baby along. And after woo-sawing, because I'm like, Marion, you're not going to show your ass. It's not worth it. I go back in and I try and have a genuine conversation with this human, because I was like, you look like my sister. I'm an elder sister to someone, and I'm also generally an elder to someone else. And in moments where I could have shown my ass, someone, typically a Black woman, has shown me grace to not show my ass. And so I'm going to show this human grace. What's happening, lady? And she's like, no, nothing. Okay. I was like, do you know that's a lawsuit waiting to happen, right? If I had cut myself. Anywho's, I'll be back here next month. I'm part of this community. Do better, okay? I'll see you later. Our pain is not seen equally. And that's scary. That's really scary, to live in a space where you just think I'm not superhuman. I literally prick just like you. That is all.
Yeah. Wow, that's a powerful story, Marianne. If you cut us, do we not bleed? Who has a thought?
I think there's also that well-intentioned comparison that people make, that you don't realize how that invalidates and causes like, well, yeah, I understand. I mean, actually, you don't understand. I don't need you to understand, because when and I said this to my wife, and I said, I don't need you to understand, because you can't understand what it's like to walk through the world in this body. But what I need you to admit is that my experience is different. And that yes, I know you see me, but you have to acknowledge that if you and I walk into a 7-Eleven, we may be seen very differently. And that can be, I mean, when I did my career, I was told all the time not to wear my hair in braids. That may not seem like a big deal, but it was to me, because that was an expression of who I was. And basically, they were saying, you look black, and I am black. So why? And so I constantly kind of dealing with this well-intentioned white lens that we've been through in this industry, where there's not that celebration of, and yeah, I also want to wait for Impro. I'll do that. That's fun. But this is this is just as valid as anything else. And for so many years, and I internalized that as well. I internalized that this is how I had to look. This is how I had to be accepted. And that's painful too, because what are the lessons we're teaching those generations? And I want that to be different for the kids that are coming up now, because I've internalized a lot of things of what it is to be normal and accepting and beautiful on many levels. And I'm realizing now how much of that was within a white lens. And I'm not saying everyone's intentionally mean, but the impact of that microaggression still impacts me today.
Of course. Tatiana.
Yeah, this is so good. I'm thinking about a play that I recently did some dramaturgy work on, a new play. It's called Good Hair. And it's just about Black women's hair. And doing a new play necessitated a bunch of Black and brown people being in a room together, having a conversation about how we were going to make a piece. And like we talked about before today, that's so rare. Like we don't get the opportunity to do that a lot. And so not just like holding this space, but I think we also have to ask the question, and something that I wish the theater company that had done this reading had been asking more, was how are we holding this space, and how are we making the things? Are we reinscribing these institutional structures that we know cause harm? And then just like breaking away from that, honestly thinking about and brainstorming and dreaming on how can these structures look different to support all of the people that we want to be included in the making of whatever story we're trying to tell.
Thank you.
I think another fun thing about being Black and an artist is that anytime you were given any position of power, or anytime you like have an opportunity, if you do not fully use that opportunity in order to like be a gateway for all the artists who you've ever known, fully represent all aspects of the like experience that you represent, never say anything that anyone would ever disagree with, and tithe 10% to the church that you haven't attended in like 5 years, like you fail. And so I'm half Cuban, so watching like the Into the Heights fiasco, where people were like, well, really great that you had a movie that represented Latinx people, but it wasn't properly representing Latinx people, which I think is a good point, because there also is that whole issue of light skin versus dark skin representation in media. But it's also like a thing of like, there are so few, this is a point that I'm stealing from somebody else, but I think it's a really good point, and I wish I remember who said it, but I read it on Twitter, so thank you, Twitter person. There's so little representation in the media that every representation that we see has to be perfect. We saw this with Crazy Rich Asians, where it was like, that is some people's experience. It's not my experience. Like, we're so thirsty for being represented that like the one chance we get, if it's not perfect, it's a letdown. And so there's so much pressure as an artist where like, I'm gonna write neurotic Black characters. I'm never gonna write the story of like somebody who grew up in the projects and like try to make a rap career. Actually, just gonna open Final Draft and like type a little bit, but like that's unfortunately not my story. I can only like represent Black nerds, and I only represent some Black nerds. Even like within that, like it's hard, and it's just sad that like that's the issue. Where and then when you see those things fail, we never see those things failing as a result of like, well, there should just be more projects like that. Where the media tends to go, well, see, we were right. We shouldn't have done that. And you just can't win.
It feels, Jeff, your point a little like, and forgive me if this is ham-fisted, but it's a sort of a thought in draft. It feels a little bit like marginalized people that have been subjugated for years and years and years, when offered an opportunity, or when finally somebody makes space for them, makes room for them, the people making the space, making the room, kind of feel like, all right, well, you know, we gave this to you, or something like that. And then in addition to that, it feels like people have a very small window of opportunity and are made to kind of fight over it, or accomplish more with it than what they should be expected to, or something like that. It feels it's the unfairness and the continued keeping down, kind of over doubling on itself, from my perspective. Who has a further thought on that?
I mean, listen, I'm sorry, Hollywood, but I'm gonna just keep it real, because listen, I don't know what else to do. I had a general meeting where they were like, what can you do for us? Like, we're looking for this like fresh new, like black women, black, black, breakity, black. That's what I heard in my head. That's not what the white people said, y'all. And I was like, listen, I'm just trying to be like Will Ferrell, like C+ energy. How you like me now? And they were quote Dr. Seuss, they one fish, blue fish, red fish, they were offended of all the fishes. They were like, what are you talking about? I said, I'm just trying to live my C+ C- life, y'all. And I clearly lost the executives, but I was like, I feel like, let's keep it real. Someone that looks like me is always going to be on point, because the life that I've lived, I'm always crossing my T's, dotting my I's. I'm up at 3:45 a.m. I'm trying to make sure I catch up with all you fabulous people up in these streets. But I would love for the people coming behind me and folks like me, I just want to like live like a decent life. Like, can you just let me live? Can I just live my life and like make C- projects and give my friends like funding so we can make C- projects? Like, listen.
My friend, who's a great jazz guy who just hasn't gotten his due in fame, is Ben Sidran, and he says, I don't want to make a killing, I want to make a living. And just, and it's a weird thing. Hollywood is a weird place. The show business, the entertainment industry is a weird animal, and it does feel like there are people who break through. And let's talk a little bit about opportunities that you've seen people get that you think they did a good job with. Shows, movies, books, anything that you found sort of inspiring. I recently watched a bit of the first episode of Small Axe, the Steve McQueen project, and man, it's just so well done. But let's talk about the positive side of how artists have found opportunities and taken advantage. Who has a thought?
Recently I saw, I had a couple friends who were in The Good Lord Bird, the adaptation that Showtime did.
Yeah.
And I thought there was some dope ass work being done in that, and some truth being told. I felt and also some ways that were a little different too. So I really appreciated that. I thought that was worthwhile. And I also appreciated Watchmen recently, of course.
Yeah.
That was also great.
Which I think busted it open for acknowledging the Tulsa massacre.
Yeah, I hope so. I was thinking about, as all of you are talking too, I was also thinking about something that I just wrapped recently. I just narrated Winfred Rembert's memoir. In case you don't know who he is, Winfred Rembert, African-American artist who spent, I think it was 7 years on a chain gang in Georgia. He was originally he got involved as a 19-year-old in the civil rights struggle during his youth, and he got sent to jail. I believe he was held in jail for like a year locally without actually being charged with anything.
Oh,
and he didn't start out to be an artist then. He only came to being an artist. He worked in leather, on leather, after almost being lynched. He survived a lynching, and then after 7 years on the chain gang. And I was just thinking about his whole experience, because it's really, it's a beautiful, real, quotidianly, if I can make that word up, raw book about his experience, about the experience of Black folks by extension, and about being an artist. It's very funny in places, but it's really, and it also, by the way, also has the, what do I say? They're not illustrations, they're reproductions of his paintings in it. It's called Chasing Me to My Grave. And the title comes from basically the fact that, like, he doesn't have the shackles on him anymore, but he feels like they are still there. He felt like they were still there, and that these experiences would be chasing him to his grave. And unfortunately, I was asked to do this project sometime in early March, and I was told that he had asked for me to do it. I was honored to do it, and then unfortunately he died at the end of March. So that's unfortunate. But I guess I was just struck by him talking. It's all him talking about his experience, and in its own way, it mirrors lots of things that we've been talking about here today too. And in his work, he's trying to tell the truth as he sees it, and I feel like that is exactly what we are charged with doing, is telling the multiplicity of truths as we see it, and I think that, it's important to keep coming strong in all of the delicacy of that. What I mean to say is, there's not one way to do that. There's not one story to tell. There are lots of stories to tell. And I think it's important for us to keep on telling it, even in the face of resistance to hearing those stories, but also even in the face of, yeah, we want all your stories, which can make it seem like, okay, now I will be performing my story. No, we have to keep telling the truth as you understand it to be. And also people say, well, to what purpose? Well, who says that? I just said it. But I'm just saying, to the purpose of, I think one of the purposes is towards connection, and towards connection, and towards understanding. Now, I'm not saying doing it, asking for you to, but I'm saying let's just tell the truth, and trust that will have its own further life. Everything will have its own byproducts from that, if that makes any kind of sense at all.
Absolutely does.
I would say for me, it was Arrival is one of the movies that I've recently watched that was really inspiring to me, and it's probably for a different reason. I watched that movie and I didn't really know who produced it, who directed it, who was the DP on it, but it was really well shot. And the reason why it falls into this category because the DP was a Black guy, Bradford Young. And for me, that's really inspiring because he just did a great job on it, and he performed. Because a lot of times, I don't know how everyone else feels, but I definitely have been made to feel less than sometimes, and not adequate, and in the sense that hey, you can do a good job on this, but hey, this is the big boys. We do the big boy stuff. So for me to see someone that looks like me do a movie that you can't even tell it's not a quote unquote Black film, it's just a movie, but it's shot beautifully, and to me that's a big thing.
Sorry to interrupt you, brother. Do you mean Arrival, the science fiction? Oh.
Yeah, Bradford Young was the DP on that.
I didn't even know that. Thank you for educating me. That's fantastic. And particularly as a big, Jeffrey, you were talking about nerds. I'm like, but isn't everybody a nerd, one way or the other, about something or other? And from a big sci-fi nerd, I'm like, that is awesome. And I really appreciate what you had to say. I'm shutting up again now.
You don't. Diana, did you want to say something?
I will, and I'll share this. And the vision that came to my mind is when my nephew went with his friend to see Black Panther, and there's this picture of my older nephew who just turned 14 a couple years ago, and he's there with all of the friends, and they're all smiling. And they're about to see this movie, and they have these huge smiles on their faces, and I know that all those boys are gonna see images of people that look like them. And it was just a moment of seeing, 7 or 6 or 7 boys, who were probably about 10 or 11 at that time, and they're smiling. And it was like, that is the power of progress to me, of what, for me it was Sounder, right? But that's the power of progress, of how, there are times when it does feel like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, 4 steps back. But I think we also have to celebrate these moments, and there is a film now about Jackie Robinson and Fred Hampton and Ma Rainey, so it may not be as often as I would like it to be, but there are hidden figures. Oh my gosh! So those are the passages where hidden stories are being told, and I think it's important to celebrate. Again, I think it's important to acknowledge we have a long way to go, but to also celebrate the milestones when we do get it right, and when we do have those moments, we can celebrate, but we cannot rest on our laurels. We just, that's the thing. It's like, well, we did that film, now we don't have to do another. No. No, I mean, that's the thing. Well, we did the Black film yesterday, so we're done for the year. No, it's increasing, and that's the thing, of not using those moments to rest on our laurels, but using them as a step forward in the progressive way we need to go.
I love that point. Anyone else with anything inspiring, or where people have gotten it right, or Jeffrey Thompson?
So I was trying to remember which films I had seen, and then I was like, oh yeah, this year's SAG Awards were very representative. including like Minari, but also we had like the Five Bloods. We had I looked at the list so I could remember everything. Judas and the Black Messiah, One Night in Miami, which I loved because the entire time I was like, this can't just be a movie where like everything goes well. They're going to be racist and they're going to like lynch everybody because I'm traumatized. I'm not sure if you remember the movie Mudbound, but like that movie, I was like, oh, it's just a fun movie about farming. And then the end, you're just like, oh no, racism is bad. Why? And like it goes back to this whole thing about like Black trauma. Like we don't need any more films about slavery, and we don't need films where women are sexually assaulted. And like that's like the like thing we're like, oh, that's a bad thing that happened. There are other bad things that can happen that can move the plot forward. It's easy and cheap, and it's usually traumatizing to the actresses who have to work in those conditions. So let's not do that anymore. But like the thing that I've been thinking about recently is like, how is it that the BBC can have more representation on screen? Like literally the people who are like, let's invent imperialism. Like they do TV representation. I'm about to start Lupin. And like, but like I remember a show, speaking of nerdy stuff, Misfits, it's a superhero show, it's British. If you love superhero stuff, it's fantastic. But it's a diverse cast. And like they come from different parts of England and it's so representative. And I don't understand anything that they're saying because sometimes the accents are very thick. Does that make me racist? Probably not. But like it's not even a thing because it's just like these are different people from that represent our country. And so of course we'd see them on screen. So it's not that hard. If Britain can do it, we can do it. Like they are upset when babies are too dark, yet we are like, well, there are too many Black people, so it's a Black people show now. Like, we could do better. It's so easy to do better.
Jeff, it makes me think about what you're talking. What comes up right away for me is like, for instance, Barry Jenkins' first film, Medicine for Melancholy. If anybody's seen that, like that film, the film was about all kinds of things. Some in the foreground, some in the background, but ostensibly. It's a story about this romance in the big, seemingly great and strange city of San Francisco and amongst these two young Black folks. But it was about this romance between them. That's what it was about.
HBO's Insecure is another great example. Like, it's not a Black people show. It just happens to be about primarily Black people in Inglewood and like their romance and their friendship. But like it's a show that's universal and a lot of people love it and watch it, but like it's a great show and like there should just be more shows like that.
Yeah, I love the film Last Black Man in San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Yes. There it is. I love that movie so much for the simple thing. It's so slow. Like, you should eat your protein when you're going to watch it. And if you're like me, don't watch it before 8 p.m. because I go to sleep. But like, it's that kind of movie where, oh my gosh, you're just basking in the energy of Black male, masculine energy in all of its variants, and that's allowed to live. And if someone's watching it and they're waiting for someone to like that's not what it is. It's just, it feels like a love story, yes, to San Francisco, but really like it feels like a love story to Black men. Like you're allowed to live in all of these variants. Look at him garden. Look at him take care of this house. And also look at him try and get that money. Like there's so many layers to it.
Love it. Looking to see if someone has a thought.
What was that movie that came out about the it won, I think it won an Oscar. A lot of different colors, purples. I can't remember the movie right now. It's about two Black gay men.
It's on everybody's tip of everybody's tongue.
Moonlight.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I like that movie simply for the fact that it dealt with Black gay men. You know what I mean? And I just think that's you know, I just thought that was cool. You know, I mean, it's just like, just that on its own, you know, and it's a well done film. And I love diversity in everything. You know, I love when, you know, I'm a skateboarder, I'm a snowboarder. I like to, I do whatever I like. You know, I listen to whatever I want to listen to. And I think, you know, we want to be inclusive. Let's include everybody, not just the people that act and do a certain way and this and that, you know, this everyone, you know, it's like, anyways, yeah. So that would be my other movie.
Yeah, man. I always love, well, I don't love it, but I always, you check my expression. I always love when people, when you get the vibe or you hear something from somebody about like, oh, that's not Black. I'm like, all lanes are mine. All lanes, mine. And yours if you want it. Take your lane, whichever one you want. It's yours.
Whatever you want, exactly.
Let no one else is. I mean, isn't that, we were talking about freedom, for instance? Isn't that the point for you to decide or to discover, you know, where you would like to go, where would you like to make a contribution? What would you like to explore? And what universes of wonderfulness can come from any of that? So I appreciate what you were saying, man.
I just want to add that, like, now, as of today, playing the oboe is a Black people thing. Like, it's a Black people instrument. It's one of the jazziest, smoothest instruments for Black people. So,
well done.
I love it.
And Black people camp right here. I camp.
And also for me, that's adding the intersection and disability into that. It's something about that's. I mean, I'm an aunt. If anyone who's my Facebook friend knows I brag about my nephews like 2 and north of them, but it's because I'm proud of them and I want to just. I really think my disability is the least interesting thing about me, and I just want to be able to be part of the story, which is why I love doing Afrofuturism, because I just get to come and play as an artist, but yet we get to see all these images. I mean, look at the diversity of Blackness that we have on this panel. You know, we're nothing but monolith, and I think when we can really represent that in the stories and the images we see, that is so powerful.
And your braids are beautiful.
Oh, God bless you. Thank you.
Tati, if I could call you out for 1 second. Tatiana has a class called The Black Aesthetic. And can you talk about, like, you know, getting your hand as a teacher? I'm talking to you, teacher to teacher. How do you get your hands around that and choose, you know, because you have, I mean, you only have a certain number of hours that you can teach your class, you know, probably either 12 or 24 or 48, whatever it is, depending on how many weeks it goes. Sort of, how do you get your hands around what to present, how to interact and lead a class called The Black Aesthetic?
Mm-hmm. Because as we've heard, Black people are not a monolith. I sang it because it's really important. Yeah, it's kind of like triage. I decide, like, what are the most important things that I want people to hit, and it's like we look at plays. So August Wilson is somebody we look at just because he's a part of the American canon. Like, a lot of his scripts, obviously, like, very male heavy. There's some misogyny going on in there, so that's something that we address. But we do look at August Wilson, and we look at Susan Laurie Parks and structure, and, like, looking at things that are not an Aristotelian, you know, building to a climax patriarchal structure. For those of you who might be listening to this, I was doing my hand in a jack off motion, and then we look at my favorite playwright.
I thought you were passing potatoes, girl.
Thank you. So I'm not going to apologize for that. And then we look at my favorite playwright, Lynn Nottage, because she's my favorite playwright and she's a brilliant playwright. Yeah, I think, like, getting a lot of Black voices, and we ask what makes a Black play. I like having, like, a guiding question. And then we can just, like, keep asking it and keep interrogating. It's like an investigation. It's like the dramaturgy training in me. Let's ask questions and learn more. Bird says asking questions is a great way of finding things out.
For real.
Yes.
Hey Tati, here's one. I mean, I'm sure you know about it anyway, but here's one you might want to investigate sometime too. I don't know if you know about. I'm sure you do. Passing Strange.
Oh yeah, so
Yeah,
good.
exactly. Just so it's so good and so many. It's just so good, but also so many interesting questions along lines we're talking about to investigate too. That it's funny. I was talking with someone a while ago who was like, "Oh yeah, I saw. Look at the middle class black." I was like, "Wait, you might have missed the whole thing. You might have missed the whole thing." But really, just because there's so many, you were talking about August and and Lynn and Susan Laurie. And here's another, and that's what I'm saying. There are so many holes and points to go to investigate as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe for the next time I do it, I'll do completely different playwrights, different plays. That requires a lot of labor on my part, so maybe that won't happen. But in an ideal world, all of the Black voices, let's compare. What makes a Black thing? What is the Black aesthetic? Why are we all Black?
Oh, it's interesting because is there a Black aesthetic? I mean, we all,
I'm
you know it when you see it.
I'm interested in this. Well, no. So this is when I was in film school, I was like adamant that there wasn't. And then as a reaction to how much there was. And so I was just bouncing off the walls and I was like, nobody's gonna put me in a box. I'm gonna do what I want, blah, 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 blah. Right? Because you're in film school, no, but really that's kind of the attitude you're supposed to have. So I'm interested, Tati, about like, even just posing that question is interesting as totally as a jump off point. And of course, there's things to identify. There's traits. There's the African American experience. There's like Frantz Fanon from Martinique. There's Senghor. There's so many like millions of Black voices from all over the world, right? So I'm always interested. I get a kick out of when you throw like dynamite in the middle of the room and everybody gets a glass of water, who can put it out first? Exactly. So I love all this kind of debate stuff, and especially in art. In art, it's very, very important. I have a lot of Black friends who are painters, and the love that the figurative art gets. They can do portraits till the day they die. They're gonna sell. Then I have friends who are in abstract, right? Black abstract artists. Women, but also just women abstract artists, or but Black women abstract artists are like so few and far between, that are actually really making it. And so again, the question comes up, well, is Black art really just like figurative? Like, is it really just the big, Cahindes and all this stuff? And then you have some of my friends who get spots. They're not out of it, but they're definitely not mainstream the way some of these other artists are. So I'm glad, Tati, that you do that, because those are the kind of questions that I figure like it takes your whole lifetime to keep discussing, and I'm always happy to jump in on those kind of things. It's really fun.
Right on.
Kimson, in the world of animation, I mean, you've been in the world of animation for a really long time and have seen a lot and worked in a lot of places. Does the same struggle exist because it lives in the same machinery, the world of animation?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and after the murder of George Floyd last year, so in Los Angeles, there's a union for the animation, and for the animators here, there's an animation union. And so, most of my career was in New York without a union. There's no union in New York. So when after everybody was posting Black squares and all the performative, respect or whatever, I kind of was voicing my opinion that, a union should be the first to defend, human rights or these kind of things. So I wrote my, union rep, and I was like, I said something somewhere, and I was like, yeah, this is how we slower than the companies that we negotiate our contracts from, right? So I was actually asked to kind of work with a Black artists group within the union. And so that's been kind of interesting in terms of just like Tati was saying, provide a space for Black artists to come and just talk. And it's been, most of the time, it's just like, people just having fun and talking and all this. Sometimes there's, because not a lot of Black people are on crews, and especially in TV, where you're gonna look around. It's definitely a white space still. Animation crews, are by default, a place. It's almost like going to an Ivy League school or someplace when you're like, ooh, but the one or two other Black people on the crew you immediately connect with, right? So those kind of things. So I'm kind of going the long way to your answer. It's definitely a struggle. It mirrors a lot of what's happening in live action. A lot of times, Black folks in live action are not behind the camera, so they're in front of the camera. So just because you see it, a lot of times people think, oh, it's Black, but actually being behind the camera means that the industry is changing. And if the industry is changing, then the things that get put in front of the camera are going to change. So I'm happy though that in the past year or two, we've seen more creators of color getting in positions, getting shows, getting deals. But we've also noticed that the pipeline to get into the animation industry is flawed in and of itself. In that, people of color don't have the opportunity to go to art school, don't have the funding to go to art school. So there's a lot of things going on. By no means is it, all encompassing, and still a lot of work to do, but the awareness is growing. And I think that's the most important thing, that even, a young brown kid could look at, could see themselves having a career in animation. Most of the time, the people who are stopping these kids aren't necessarily the jobs, that comes later, but it's their parents. So a lot of times we're trying to convince parents that, there's money here, these aren't cheap budgets, that, these Pixar movies are not like, these are, you're going to make a living, you know what I mean? You definitely have to get to that level, but you're going to make a living. And so that's like our very first line of kind of challenge. We kind of got that shown to our face a little more in the past year. We've been doing some outreach, and these kids just want to draw, and then their parents are like, that's not a viable vocation, and we're like, and I was that kid, right? So I'm like, I kind of did exactly what your kid is doing. So all my friends who have kids that are 12, they're all calling me up, hey, what should I do with my kid? What they like to draw? I'm like, all right, here we go. Step one, step two, step three. So I do my part where I can.
Yeah, that's great to reach down and help people inspire their kids.
Yes.
We can't have a mention of what goes on behind the camera without talking to the man who is behind the camera. Dennis, can you talk a little bit about, I mean, I know that it sounds sort of ridiculous to say, can you talk about your experience as a Black man behind the camera? But if I can just pick one project, the Cove, which is, I'll let you describe the Cove. That film just tore me up. But if you could maybe just talk about that for 1 second, and then maybe more broadly about your experience.
Yeah, the Cove was a great project to work on. It was a passion project, and Luis Ahoyas, who's the director, he brought me on, and it was really nice to work on something that was really trying to make a difference in the world. I got to shoot a bunch of the interviews for the project, and I also did a lot of the editing. I spent 3 months editing on that, and as you know, it won an Oscar for Best Documentary. But in terms of being, there's not a lot of people like me. I worked in Colorado. I had my production since 2000. And generally, I'm usually the only Black person on set. One of the nice things about coming out to LA now is that's totally different. There's a lot more people doing stuff out here that look like me, which is really inspiring. But I always felt I had a lot to prove, because most of the time I felt like no one really thought a whole lot about or really thought that I could do anything. So I'm always kind of proving myself. So it's actually very motivating for me. It's kind of the thing where, my goal is to win an Oscar for being a cinematographer. So that's where I'm at with it, because I just feel like, why not? But there's definitely been a bunch of times where I've had crews and I'll have an AC that's Black, and it's really nice because we both look at each other and it's like, because it's just what you were saying earlier. It's I don't know what it is, but most people just don't think that's something. It's a viable career, you know. And I've made my living doing this since I was 19, you know. And now I'm kind of going through the same thing again with the feature film industry. You know, it's panning out. I have 4 movies that I've worked on, but it's like you're proving yourself again. And I feel like I'm starting out from scratch because I did a lot of documentaries. You know, I traveled with a lot of athletes, a lot of pro athletes, and you don't have to go through the traditional route. And now I'm finding out why they say that saying, you know, it's all about who you know. um eh, but yeah, I think I answered your question.
Dennis, can I you did, of course. Can I impose one more thing on you, which is that you've recently worked in, I think, Senegal and traveled around the area, including, I have some insider information, y'all. Can you talk? I mean, I don't know how much you want
Yeah.
to talk about your own travels, but
No,
it sounded like you had an interesting experience.
Yeah, I just got back from Africa. I was out there shooting a documentary for a company called Segi TV, and the owner of the company, it's a black man. He owns it. He's one of, I think, 10 that owns a publicly traded company, and he hired us to. He sponsored a team that is taking electric cars. It's the first of its kind, electric vehicles racing in remote areas, trying to bring awareness to climate change. The team that he's sponsoring it's all white, and it's really kind of a role reversal. You know, generally we're used to you know, owners being white and
Sure.
players being black, kind of thing, and it's really kind of cool to see the opposite. And that's what I love. I love diversity of all kinds. So anyways, we went to Africa, and we went to Gory Island, and it was a real experience. I mean, you know, growing up in America, roots and slavery, it's all, you know, you believe it, and but it's like it's like this big myth, you know. So going to Gory Island, this place where 15 million slaves went through, and seeing these walls and seeing these rooms that are the size of the room I'm in, and they had, you know, they fit 20 males in, and then it just was a really tough experience. And then another thing too is, like, you know, I'm a light-skinned person, and I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me over there. Most of the people were dark-skinned, so it's just like all these things. It reminds you, because I feel like in America, um, a lot of we're convinced that it's all in our heads and a lot of stuff, and don't really talk about it because we don't really want to hear about it. You know, we don't want to hear you complaining about, you know, all your woes, and then you really think it's like it wasn't really that long ago. And then there's so much, because I'm the kind of person that I don't really like to acknowledge things, because I don't like feeling less than. And I feel like that's probably why when Barack Obama was elected, that it was so emotional for me, and I cried like really hard. And I realized it's because I didn't feel like a equal citizen in America, you know. And I don't know. It's a lot of stuff, and so.
Can I just add a little something to what
Of
you're
course.
saying? I just wanted to say, you know, I was reflecting on, you know, what everybody's been sharing, but specifically now what you're talking about too, Dennis, and it ties back into something I was thinking a while ago as I was listening. You know, what's so important, I think, in what we all do, um, is to be willing to and to allow and hold space for the vulnerability of Black folks as well, in whatever dimension or whatever row you're working in, or rows or lanes that you're working in, to be able to hold space for just saying, this is a human, full range, full dimension, and they are allowed to be as human as they are, whether you accept that or not. So sorry, Dennis, what you were saying brought that up again. So I thought it might be worthwhile to share before we all go away.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate that, because I don't think our vulnerability has been allowed often for men or women. The strength we have to have, and and that had not, two things can be true at the same time. Being strong doesn't negate vulnerability, and I think that we've been taught and learned you have to be strong, but that does not negate that it's hard and the vulnerability. And I think we can be both at the same time, and our vulnerability comes out of that strength of being strong is not always easy. So I really appreciate you saying that, Deanna.
Sure, my pleasure, sister. And there is in fact strength in vulnerability. You know, the thing I realize as I'm drilling down to what you said, Dennis, that made me think about is about the fact that when you were talking about crying hard because you felt like, you know, your own citizenship, and well, I'll go farther to say you didn't say this, but I'll extrapolate and say your humanity was not fully seen, or you didn't feel that way. But in fact, you know, I think there's strength in that, and in claiming that space. Not even talking about trying to be strident, just claiming that space, you know, and what you said is true about not always feeling allowed to do that. But I think it's important to continue. It's hard because, you know, it's hard sometimes to allow yourself to be vulnerable, but I think it's important. So.
Yeah, one of my, as a mother, one of the things I can share with my children is travel. I give them and I show them my passports, and then I show them their passports. And I want them, when we're in the airport, to look phenomenal for themselves, to recognize just the enjoyment of this experience. The airplane, getting off, touch landing, seeing the different clouds that change. The colors in a different country of the clouds is different from here. You know that you're in a different place as soon as you land, because you're like, wait a second, well, where's the mountain? Where's this? I want them to soak that into their spirit, so much so that when I'm gone, anyone who tries to displace their strength and their love and their right to be human, they can remember that and sit in who they are, you know?
Absolutely. Who else has a thought?
I think that like balance between vulnerability and strength. Diana, you were talking about being seen not just for your disability, and I think it's very hard to be Black and not neurotypical, because you're just not allowed to be that. You're like going to complain about racism and also be depressed. Why are you depressed? Like, what's to be depressed about? You have rhythm. I don't know.
Yeah, can you tell us what neurotypical means? I'm sorry.
Yes. No. Neurotypicality is the idea of just like having a normally functional brain. So no depression, anxiety, no ADHD, which is a very weird standard considering how common all those things are. And
you have a cold?
Huh?
Can you have a cold?
You cannot. You cannot. No weakness allowed. But it is like even within that, like the idea of like being sick, and like we're not allowed to be in America like sick. You know what I mean? Like you're like, hey, I have a cold, I can't come to work. It's like, no, you have to come to work. And it's like, remember that, like that whole thing? Like it's a new thing. Like as of this year, where we're like, oh, if you're sick, don't come to work. Because we don't want you to spread that disease. But there are these unrealistically high standards for being strong. And so it's like, and just a weird like dichotomy of like the things that these terrible things that have happened in your history and in the history of your people shape you into this strong person, but they're not allowed to negatively affect you. And if you talk about how it's negatively affected you, then why are you complaining? And it's just weird and bad. And then if you layer anything else on top of that, it just, nobody wants to hear about people struggling, and no one wants to hear that somebody's life could have been harder than theirs. Back to the idea of like privilege. Like if, you know, I'm like, wow, I've really struggled to be in the industry, and then like I have a friend who's Black, Muslim, and female, and she's like, I've struggled too. I'm like, no, my life is hard. And then like, oh my God, I'm sorry for yelling. I'm a feminist. I'm an ally. Now make it about me and my feelings and making me feel better. So the I really hope
you're
that
not
that
allowed
gets
to have
taken
any,
out of
you're not allowed to have
context.
any work to do still either, right?
Yeah, of course. Like you, we all have. It's just really messed up, and I think the idea of Dion, you were talking about like being able to see your own humanity, and I think learning to acknowledge that in ourselves is super important, but also to gain empathy, we need to see that in other people.
Jeff did a little bow.
Yeah.
Okay, so being an educator, being a parent, and then being a daughter of educators throws me at a problematic place, because I know educators, we be problematic as hell. Okay, so I have to say that out loud. Okay, now what I tell my children, which is what my parents mirrored, oh my gosh, do or act, not say. I'm trying, it's hard, but they literally did let me make mistakes. They were like, do whatever you want. I'm like, I don't want to do guitar anymore. Okay. I don't want to do, okay. I don't want to do track anymore. Okay. Like no one was like, you have to be, I'm Nigerian, and I've heard horror stories from other Nigerian kids that are like, you have to, and my parents were just like, we don't want you to blame us when we're gone. So like literally just try everything. And if you make a mistake, just get up and try it again. Just do it. Like don't worry about it, perfection. Just try everything. The world is your oyster. And even more so, you have this phone that you can literally have the brain of a Harvard graduate by the time you finish high school if you wanted to. The world is your oyster. I always say to my child, either someone else is shaping your world for you, or you are shaping your world for yourself. Either one is okay, but recognize one or the other is happening, you know?
Sound advice, Marianne? Who's taking the conch? Jeff Thompson.
I think it's important to find your voice, then hone your voice, and then believe in it. Because knowing what you want to say and how you want, like what thing you want to do is really important, because then you can hone it and work towards it. And it also doesn't matter like what it is. Like Marianne, you were saying that you just wanted to do C+ work, but like Will Ferrell kicks ass. Like if you want to be that, like then just be the best that you want to be. Like it doesn't have to. Back to what I was saying earlier, we don't all have to be like the people who are. We don't all have to be Spike Lee. Some of us can be, Medians. Like, and that's fine. But like, hone it and then believe in it, because at the end of the day, the person who believes in you the most is going to be your mom. Just kidding. Some of us don't have good relationships with our mothers, but I do. Hi, Mom, who's listening. Love you. Thanks for all your support. But like that like belief which drives you forward and goes, I have something that I want to share with the world, and I'm going to share it no matter what obstacles come up for me.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
I think those of us that love to teach should teach and see teaching as an extension of who we are as an artist. I think there's so much, either you act or you teach as if one, I think teaching allows you to continue to make your living as an artist. And I think, but the thing is, we need, for the younger generation, we need to be able to hold the door open for them and sometimes give them what we didn't have. So I think education and creating programs how we can, if that's what you feel, to teach, because we can bring up the next generation. And so I think education, again, if you're called to be a teaching artist, is something so important, because I knew about theater because I took classes. That's how I learned. How do you know you want to be an animator if you're not allowed to experience as a child what it's like to be an animator? So to continue to advocate and use our voices to advocate for arts education and programs that allow kids, Black and brown kids who may not know about this thing, to say, hey, here's an opportunity for you to learn. Because I learned I loved acting because I had the opportunity to act as a child. So to be a part of those programs, again, if you like to teach, that arts education is so important. Not only does it build an audience, but how you discover, I want to animate. I want to play the oboe. But you don't learn that unless you don't know what an oboe is. If you've never seen an oboe, how are you gonna know that you want to play an oboe? So I think finding an opportunity to give back, if that is your call, is equally important.
Thank you, Diana. Who has a thought about inspiring or advice?
I would like to say, even if you don't really do really well in school, which I didn't really do well in school, or if you have a disability, which I was considered learning disabled in school, which I don't really tell anybody. This is the first time I really talked about that. But English, I didn't do really well at all. But, I don't think there's something out there for you to do. I mean, I don't know. Just don't let anybody tell you can't do it. That's really all it comes down to. Whatever you feel like you want to do it. Because I don't really think a lot of people thought that I could do stuff, and I just did it anyways. So, and then I want to share this picture, actually, if that's all right. It's a picture of my family, and I just wanted to kind of show us back from the 70s.
Oh, dude, that is so cool. Can you, you get a little glare. Can you, there you go. There you go. Wow, look at those. Oh, man, those outfits are fantastic.
That's me in the center, by the way. Anyways, that was it.
Oh, that is such a lovely family pic. Who has thoughts of advice or guidance or words of wisdom or anything like that for young artists or Tatiana?
I'd say be cool. Just be cool. Because I remember all the uncool people I've worked with, and it was not cool working with them. And I definitely remember all the cool people I work with, and I want to work with them more.
That's good advice. That is really good advice, and weirdly pertinent to a recent experience. Kimson.
I was gonna say, the great thing about art is that you never get worse the more you do it. You always get better and better and better. The hard part is growing with it and looking at your mistakes, in my experience. So, and still to this day, like, they're so apparent, and dealing with your faults, so blatantly. But you always get better. So playing the oboe, whether you started yesterday or you've been doing it for 20 years, the point is that you didn't give up, and you're not going to get worse by playing it. So that would be my advice if you're to anybody, actually, young or unyoung. And then I had a question for Mr. Baritone, who does 48 Hours.
Yeah. Wait, Kimson has segued us into the questions, but go ahead. Yes, go ask.
I mean, listen, I've binged that show so many times.
Oh, thank you,
and
brother.
to like literally to literally meet the voice that is like describing the moment before the confession. And I work with a ton of voice actors, like, so don't get me wrong, like but that's like
first of all, let's do that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. Please go ahead, though.
But so I just wanted to ask you, what is your experience in, this is just me geeking out industry wise about what you do, specifically for that show. So, and I'm sure you record like 1 million of them in one day and all this stuff, they give you the script and but no. Okay. So that's one. How do they do
Never
it?
more than the most than one day I've done has been 3, but usually no more than 2.
Okay. And then now that this show this has been going on for how long? The show's been on? For like 10 something years?
We've been on, I think if it's not 17, it's near 17 years. So about 19 seasons. But let's say
you've been there, you're Mr. 48 Hours, voice of since the beginning.
Originator, brother.
I gotta give you props. Okay, so
I have something to say about that. Listen, I'd love to tell you that I'm just bragging, but no, I have something. I've said that to counterpoint something else that I'll say later.
Okay, but now that this show is like a phenomenon, right? Like I've been part of projects that are like in the ether and everybody knows about and stuff. But 48 Hours is a very specific phenomenon, in American culture. And I feel like, to be honest, I didn't know that there was a Black guy doing the voice, right? So now that's like, my mind is blown on that. But then the second thing is, and I probably should have, but the second thing is, how do you feel about the show and your work on that show? Is it just a check? Is it, people are great? Like, I know that when you're doing something, especially television, it's so repetitive. But now the show is it is its own entity. And how do you feel about, this is a fan talk. Sorry, Mike. I just into
No, I love it.
Spot.
That was my
as a
point.
fan and as an appreciator of your art and of your craft, how do you feel about your experience on that show?
So much to say. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, first of all. And I'm sure I have a question. Should I ask the question first? Well, yeah, I am going to ask the question first. So, Kimson, is there any particular reason why you're asking me how I feel?
Oh, that's a very good very good question.
I will answer your question.
In the vein of like the cop shows, right? And especially what's been going on in the last year, there's been Cops was taken off the air, then it was quietly put back. There's an industry that's made a whole lot of money on the visual oppression of brown people. And so I wanted to know. Now, First 48 is a little different, certain ways it's not. Sure. A lot of the detectives are brown on First 48. So you have like kind of a, but I wanted to understand where you saw it in that spectrum. I know why you asked that question.
No, but I absolutely hear everything you're saying, and I really appreciate it. But I just thought I always think that somebody else said it before too, but I also think that sincere questions are always good, right? And I wanted to bring out of the shadows exactly what you were alluding to, or what you might have been alluding to. So here's the thing. When we first started doing it, I'd done another show with the executive producer, who was the original executive producer of the show. I guess you'd call him the creator of the show too. And he asked me when he was getting this off the ground we had a great time together, and he asked me if I would come do this as well. And I said, yes. We had no idea, of course, that it was gonna have this kind of longevity and that it was gonna be a thing. So I remember when I saw the first show or so, maybe it was the first one, maybe it was the first couple. And I was like, now, are we always going to be in only one community? Or, and then some, one producer I had in the early days was like, well, that's where the crime, and I was like, no, that's not true. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is this, is that I try to keep the integrity level really high on the show. And the show is, I am proud of the work that people do on the show and that I do on the show. I know where I'm coming from on the show, and the show has evolved even over the years. When it's like 17, it's almost 20 years old. So when it first came on, you also have people, as you know, Kimson, who were like, well, this is the way we make a show, or this is the way we make this kind of movie. And, I was always like, well, but we don't have to, let's not worry about other people's tropes or any kind of formula. Just make what we're trying to make, which I feel like over the course of time in particular, that way of thinking, I was trying not to say my impact, but I'll say that and some other conscious, mindful people trying to make something worthwhile has only gotten more and more into the bones of the show, I hope. And I think you'll see some things coming up, some of the shows that are coming out soon, now the production's ramped up again, that are gonna reflect some, I won't call it risk-taking. I mean, it'll be a kind of risk-taking before the medium, but risk-taking and exploring some different aspects to address some things that I think are really, really valuable and valid. But I feel, I know I try to keep the integrity level very high on the show. Like there was a period of time we had a new EP who was like, and they were like trying to make the show they tried to make it very promo-y and not the whole show, but in certain, and I was like, why are we doing that? And they're like, well, because they weren't trying, of course you have to work with your collaborators. But I was like, let's just keep, they're like, wait, should the read be more? And I'm like, I don't know why the read should be more anything. We're talking about someone's murder, someone's death. We're talking about the impact on their family. So not that I'm trying to make it anything, but I merely want to tell the truth as I recognize and feel it in this moment. So I feel good acknowledging also that like there's always things to investigate and things to interrogate and things to work on. In the early days, also there were those people who felt like, well, it's not a cop show, but it's a show we follow the cops. That's the show. I'm like, well, yes, we do follow the investigation, but I see no reason why we can't identify and humanize all these humans who are on it, from the cops sincerely doing their work, or the cops doing their work who also have human issues too, to the victims, to the suspects, to the families. One thing that was of concern to me is that, it isn't concern to me, it's something to see now also, we're not just in Black and Brown communities, and that's a conscious thing that's happening now too. There's so much to say, but let me just try to button it up a little bit. One thing that I do notice is that often enough, you'll see things that this happened because it seemed to be drug related, which as far as I'm concerned, I'm like, so the line to being a crime of poverty is really clear to me. So what I hope in trying to keep the integrity level very, very high, and what I feel like what I see and what I hear from the fan base is that it ends up being, even though we might not have always been trying to do this way on the nose, but a deep, also sociological look of how we live in. For a while, we were told that like things were great, the economy is great, but for everybody, is it good for everybody? And also wherever we are now, is it good for everybody? And the effects of how we're living. And also, yeah, so there's a whole thing I could say, but that's something that I try to keep the interior level high. And it's very funny to me. I didn't know there was a Black guy, because one time, so there's a forum on the forum, every now you'll see like, I didn't know that guy was Black. And I'm like, also, and then you hear people say like, oh, I thought he was a middle-aged white guy, whatever. And then it also brings the question again, like, what is Black? First of all, I'm not even.
That's
Exactly. I'm not even intending to do myself on the show. I'm doing the narrator of that show.
But I was gonna say that that's an important issue. I didn't know that guy was black. What does that mean?
Right.
Like
exactly. Well, it goes back to what is black representation in media, right? Which is so many. But anyway, just I'm pretty good with my ears. Like sometimes I play games, and it's really.
I feel you. I totally feel you.
So much voice. Anyway, thank you for all your taking the time to explain all that.
Thank you.
Listen, and I don't want to get you in trouble or anything like that.
No, not at all. This is I think anything that I've said here has been said publicly amongst my colleagues, and we had something came up. So let me share something with you. This is a little thing, but for instance, a show that's coming up, we had something, and again, it's not what you and everyone has said so much. It's not so much in some things are not even intentional bias or intentional. Right. It's just people's experience, which is why it speaks to also why producers, directors behind the, deeply involved in making the show, we need representation there too. But this little incident I'm going to share with you is, so we had in this case, horrific case, domestic abuse case. And so two cases are tied together in the show because there are two cases in the show, but it's really focusing on one case a little bit more. But as we come to the discovery and fruition that this person's spouse did this, on the screen came up a mugshot of this black man. And I don't know about all you guys, but I just know from being a child, what that means. And now it's oh God, don't let him be black. Or oh my God, right? And then of course and then the other one came up, and we hadn't been talking about him, but another mugshot of the first case's spouse or boyfriend. And I wanted to share with them. I was like, well, here's how it hit me. And you did that. I was like, well, is it important? One comes up, I understood why I want, but we bring them both up. It begins to suggest to me that subliminally that black men are prone to domestic abuse. They might kill you, right? And so interestingly, my team was very thoughtful. They're that's not at all. They just hadn't thought. They were like, no, somebody put the shoes. I didn't think about it, but somebody wanted to try it out to highlight the fact it was their spouses. And I get it, but you guys know, just from the imagery of you see that mugshot, that grainy mugshot, all of a sudden that we don't see with everyone. So you feel me? That's just that's a little tiny thing, and that's going to be changed. It's not going to happen that way. So
right. Yay.
Sorry.
We got into it. No, I'm glad. So I just want to give an opportunity for anybody who has a question for another roundtable guest before we jump off, because a few of you just got to know each other just this afternoon.
Well, Jeffrey, I would love to know your showcase experience, because when I was in showcase, they gave me your sketch with Chris as the perfect template. And I was like, as a writer, I was like, who is this Jeffrey Thompson? And why is this work so good? And then consequently getting to meet you in these improv streets, I'm like, I'm never going to be able to say this out loud because it would be weird. But now I've said it, so... awesome job! That was such kick-ass work. And how was that your brain mostly? Was it you working with Chris? What was that like? Do you know what sketch I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Was it Walking on Broken Glass?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is hilarious to me that I am so well regarded as a writer in the community, but I do not make money as a writer. I also wrote a sketch for the ABC showcase, and a month ago, an actress reached out to me, and she was like, I'm using your sketch as an audition piece. I always like researching the writer. I just want to reach out and say how privileged I am to read your work. And I was like, I'd forgotten that I wrote it. Also, wow. This was a year ago. No one told me that they were using it. Wow. So So to answer your question, I do have to give a lot of the credit for the work to Chris for the sketches that we got in. We do work collaboratively, but the ones that sometimes what we would do is somebody would pitch something and then we just build it. So I definitely have to give that to that being Chris's brainchild, but I did help a little bit. So but yeah, I think writing is just weird because you just don't know what will resound with people and what won't. So I always tell people when they ask me for writing advice, what you just have to write constantly. That's literally it. I didn't realize it until recently when I started doing generals. That thing that people say where it's you write a bomb ass script, everybody loves it, and people are oh, we love your script, it's so good, it's a bit everybody's talking about it, and then they're what else are you working on, and but you just told me that script, you have to keep on writing. So and because I the script that just won a contest, it hasn't been bought yet, hopefully, but people were well, what else are you working on, what else have you got, we can't do this thing, but maybe we could. So you just have to write. We didn't know that script would be one that people loved. I didn't know that my dumb script about roommates trying to be polite and let the other one use the restroom first would be a script that ABC is using for their showcase.
Wow.
You just do it and believe in it.
Well, can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
We are so out of time.
Oh man.
Oh, but
I'm
my
so
elbow's
sorry.
so low.
Oh man.
Gotta soak my reed. Sorry, it's gonna take 30 seconds to soak.
Tatiana had to
say no limits.
Tatiana had to jump. Dion's fixing to jump, I think, pretty soon. Are you?
Oh, I was saying, and I wanted to say no limits. And that I don't know is very powerful. We get trained that never let them see you sweat. Always fake it till you make it. And I'm I don't know is a very powerful place, because as soon as you acknowledge that to yourself, you can begin to find out.
Oh, I love that. I don't know. Let's just make sure. Look, Diana Elizabeth Jordan had a thought that she wanted to share, I think.
This has been amazing. Just so amazing to be with all of you, and yeah, thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. Thank you all. I have
It's amazing, and my grandmommy is very happy up in heaven right now because I'm with Black people.
Oh, I love it.
But no, it's really been a community that we formed, and I think that's important too. Just come together and talk, and thank you for creating a space, Mike, where we can really share, because that's how we move forward, by listening and then taking steps to move forward as best we can. It won't be easy, but it's important.
Well, I am honored and find it a great privilege that you all agreed to come and talk. And I think that this recording, particularly the audio podcast version, when we can create it, will educate and entertain for years and years and years to come. I say that before I've heard Jeff Thompson play the oboe. But quickly, Marion, is your follow-up quick, do you think? Is it quick? We don't want to go to, all right, because I have to encode this. I mean, I'm speaking Dennis's language. This recording has to be made available within an hour. All right, so I guess I'm going to thank everyone. Tatiana Godfrey, Dion Graham, Dennis Flippin, Kimson Albert, Diana Elizabeth Jordan, Marion Isufu, and Jeffrey Thompson. Thank you so much for being on Impro Talk with me, and we will do this again. Some sort of roundtable we'll figure out some event to get everybody back, get the band back together. And yeah, so Jeff, I guess we're going to cue. Kimson, did you want to say something before we? All right. So,
oboe time.
Yeah, it's oboe time, I think.
My reed's too dry. It dried out. We'll just have to do it next time. I'm sorry, guys.
Oh man.
Stop playing. Stop playing, man. Come on. You're not gonna try?
Yeah, I was waiting for too long. I should have let it stay in my mouth. Guys, if we need to end it, it's
Mike
fine.
Rock. Damn you, Mike Rock.
No, I can. I'm happy to. I'm going to ask.
While he moisturize.
No, I've got questions. I've got questions.
Okay, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Actually,
No,
Mike,
if we
I
need to end it,
have
it's
to run
fine.
though.
Everybody,
Yeah, I gotta
now
run,
everybody
Mike.
does have to run. All right, y'all.
I do have to run. Thank you so much.
Happy Juneteenth.
Take care, everybody.
Happy
Juneteenth.
Peace and love. Thank you for being with us.